everyone! In this video, let us tackle about the manners of articulation. So what is manners of articulation? Manners of articulation is the way the airstream is affected as it flows from the lungs and out of the nose and the mouth. So manners of articulation is how the airstream obstructed to produce consonant sound. If we talk about place of articulation, it is the where the sound is produced. And the manner of articulation is how they're produced. There are 6 basic of manners of articulation we will look at. So the first one is stop or plosive. It is the nasal consonants are created when you completely block airflow through your mouth and then let the air pass through your nose. So stop sounds produced by blocking the airstream completely and then releasing it in a burst of air, just like the name describes it. Stop. Stops are sounds that cannot be prolonged, but they just happen and then stop. Let me give you an example. The first one, the p, p, and then the b, b. You see? Both of them cannot stretch or cannot prolong, but can explode. Look. P, 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 b, b, b. The next manner of articulation is the fricative. While nasal and stop consonants involve a complete blockage of the vocal tract, fricative sounds involve only a partial blockage of the vocal tract so that the air has to be forced through a narrow channel. So fricative are consonant sounds produced by a partial obstruction of the airstream. If there is stop, there is a complete obstruction and then there's a same release. The fricative, there's just a partial obstruction. Let me give you an example. The first one is the th, th, th. The second one is the v, v, v. These two sounds occur with the bottom lip approaching the top teeth. And then basically, they touch each other but there is just enough space for air to come out. So the next one is a fricative. When stop consonants mix with fricative consonants, the result is an affricate consonants. Affricate consonants start as stop sounds air building up behind an articular, which then releases through a narrow channel as fricative. So affricate sounds that have a combination of stop and fricative. So how does it react? Is it more like stop or more like fricative? Let's find out. So we've got a j, 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 like a jacket. These sounds cannot be prolonged. So even if they have combination between the two, what's really happening is they're behaving sort like stop. They just occur in a burst of air and then they disappear. However, they have slightly different. They're not as explosive like the stop. They are a little bit softer, and that's create the quality of the sound.
So the next manner of articulation, it's the nasal. So far we've been talking only about sounds that are produced where the airstream is coming out of the mouth, but the nasal are actually produced. So the nasal consonants are created when you completely block airflow through your mouth and let the air pass through nose. So there's basically 2 nasals. What happens the first one? Let's take the m. The lips close and that's where the airstream is being stopped. But the air actually leaves the nasal cavity and that's what gives it that different quality. You could try pinching your nose and closing your nose and try producing this sound, and it is impossible to do because you need the air coming out the nasal cavity for it to actually sound like that. The difference with the n is that the air is actually stopped with the tip of the tongue at the alveolar ridge, but still the air comes out the nose. And now if we talk about the sounds, obviously, the is a bilabial nasal because it's occurring at the bilabial place of articulation. The N is an alveolar nasal. We have the liquids. Now they're called liquids because the air actually comes out the mouth, but in a very fluid manner. So liquids are segments produced where airflow is allowed to continue through the vocal tract at relatively uninhibited. The fricatives, they have a lot of friction, is turbulent air, but the liquids are very fluid air coming out of your mouth. There's only two liquids. You have the lateral, which is the letter L, pronounced L, like in the light and belly and call. So what happens here is that the tip of the tongue touches the alveolar ridge, but the air actually escapes through the sides of the tongue, and that's why it's called the light. And then we also have the retroflex, which is the R, like in right, carry, or car. It's called the retroflex because when you're producing it, the tip of the tongue slightly bends backwards, and that's what retroflex means. Retro meaning back and flex meaning bending. So the tip of the tongue bends backward and produces the clear quality of the English R. So when describing these sounds, these two are actually alveolar liquids. But you say alveolar liquid, you mean either one, so the very clear we call the lateral the alveolar lateral, and the retroflex the alveolar retroflex. Last manner of articulation is the glides. So glides are segments that are essentially like tiny vowels. These are sounds produced with little obstruction of the airstream. So glides are sounds that are produced with the relatively wide opening of the mouth and little turbulence. They are also called semi-vowels, and I'll explain why in a second. The glides in the English language are the W and the Y, or the W and the Y. So if you think about these two sounds, they're actually produced with a lot of air coming out of the mouth. Just really wide opening of the mouth, you have way, way. For example, w. There's a lot of space for the airstream to pass. It's the same thing goes for y. Y, yes. There's not a lot of blockage that's occurring. But they're called the semi-vowels because their place will affect how they behave. So in all these cases that you see here, the glides are occurring of the beginning of the syllables. So for example, you have way which is clearly in the beginning. But you also have awoke, and that's in the beginning of the syllable. Same thing here, yes, and grow year. So grow year when they occur at the beginning of the syllable, before the vowel. These glides will act like consonants, and that's when they're called glides. But if you have a glide that occurs after the vowel, it could be at the end of the syllable or right next to the vowel. Before the next syllable, these would actually be considered vowels, not consonants. So, they're only consonants when they occur at the beginning of the syllables, and that's why we call them glides or semi-vowels. The W or the W is the bilabial glide, and the Y or the Y is the alveopalatal glide.